Good afternoon, everybody. Hi. First of all, I'd like to welcome you all in this Thales webinar, where we will talk more on how to safely enable access to your applications and to your cloud solutions. My name is Giovanni. I'm one of the local business development managers here at Exclusive Networks Belux. Now, before I give the word to my technical colleague Steven, I just wanted to remind you that we will be recording this session. Everyone is on mute now, but please do not let this stop you from asking questions. So if you have any question, you can raise your hand with the raise your hand button, but I will also monitor the question box on the right side of your screen. If you have any question, just type it there and we can answer your questions on the spot. So now I will give the word to my technical colleague, Steven, and I hope you enjoy today's session.
Thanks, Giovanni. Okay, so my name is Steven Eertkens. For those who don't know me, I'm a technical SE within Exclusive Networks, responsible for a couple of solutions, and one of them is the portfolio of Thales. And the topic of today is STA, SafeNet Trusted Access. So the agenda for today is I will do a quite short presentation of about 20-30 minutes maximum. After that, I will give the word to Dennis Verhoeven, who is an SE working at Thales, who is going to present a demo. And after that, we open up the call for questions. But like Gio already said, don't hesitate to ask questions in the meantime. So let's make it interactive. Okay. So before Corona, what was and in general, in the past, what did we see? How was the landscape then? So users were dialing in into the data center or into the office once in a while or sometimes all day. But the thing is, the data was on premise. Okay, so we had typically a firewall which acted as a remote access device, and people were logging in with a VPN client, username, password, and in the best case with multi-factor authentication. What we see the last years is that okay, applications are shifting to the cloud and often to SaaS applications. You see here on the slide, Office 365 is a typical example, and we see that data is getting synced between the data center and the cloud. Okay, but what we also see is that users often log in with a username and a password, but since we have the data which is synced between data center and the cloud, it should be the goal that that data is protected the same way. Okay, and that is often not the case. Now, people or companies start making use of more and more SaaS applications, and that means more passwords to remember and often also different usernames. Okay, but because for some SaaS applications, we, for example, log in with our SAM account name. Another application, we use our email address, or maybe our surname or employee number. It becomes complex. And what we also see is password fatigue, and people are going to, or some people at least, are going to reuse the same password for the different applications. And that is, of course, a risk. What we also see is that hackers attempt to phish the credentials by making phishing sites, by making, for example, a fake Office 365 page trying to phish the credentials. So we need to protect it, of course. And how are we going to solve this? Of course, it's a no-brainer. We need multi-factor authentication. Okay, only a password, that's a no-go nowadays. Okay, so with multi-factor authentication, we are going to solve the issue with phishing credential or with credential theft. Okay, now as I already said, for the different SaaS applications, also different usernames are often used. This is not user-friendly to the user. And what we also would like to offer to the user is single sign-on. Now, to the backend, we can still work with the different kind of usernames, because I can imagine that it's not so easy to change an application that it's going to use all the same usernames over all the applications. But to the front end, we're going to make sure that all the users are going to log in with their username, which is always the same. And to the backend, we can make use of all these different protocols. So Radius, for example, is the most common one, which we use from the early days. But nowadays, web applications and almost typically all SaaS applications will be reached or will be integrated via either SAML or OpenID Connect. Why those protocols? Because these are the smart authentication protocols. These are the protocols which makes single sign-on possible. Okay. Now with access policies, we are going to define how we are going to log in. For example, we can make a policy that for Office 365, we are going to log in with a token. But for Salesforce, I would like to have an additional password, for example, and a token. Okay, so this is all defined in the access policies, and I'll come back to that in more detail on the later on the following slides. Apart from that, we also have agents. For example, we have a Windows logon agent. We can protect our laptop or Windows laptop with a Windows logon agent, so that we are going to log in with our token instead of a username and a password. This is also the best solution to, for example, protect a terminal server with Windows Remote Desktop. Okay, just install the agent and we will log in with the username and a password. Typically, another example of such an agent is, for example, IIS, okay, the web server of Microsoft, or Outlook Web Access. Now, if we have a look at the identity lifecycle, we have to make a distinguish between identity governance and administration and access management. Now, what's the difference? Identity and governance and administration, this is typically provisioning the users in most cases, Active Directory. Okay. And authorization is also done here in the EGA phase. Now, Thales STA is not going to take care of this. The domain of STA resides below, and this is about setting access policies. How is a user going to log in? Okay, we're going to also set the multi-factor policies, the provisioning of tokens. What are the methods a user can use to authenticate to an application? And also setting up smart single sign-on policies, integration with the different applications to make single sign-on policies, to make single sign-on possible. Now, if a user would leave the company or change teams, of course, we need to deprovision the user from the Active Directory group. So this is again not done on the STA level, but we have an agent, a directory sync agent, which will communicate with Active Directory so that the users in Active Directory will be visible and available in STA to set up our policies. Excuse me, my voice is a little bit not so okay. So again, another slide saying the same thing. So what is STA taking care about? We're going to do the authentication, the single sign-on, and the access policies. Okay, this is the access management part. The authorization and the provisioning part is done on Active Directory most of the case. And this is the identity governance and administration. Okay, so Thales is the 3 layers on the bottom. Now, from a high level view, what is Thales now doing? So authentication, smart single sign-on, and policy-based access. Why smart single sign-on? Because we can enable single sign-on in such a way that it will depend on the use case. Okay, I'll come back to that later. Now, STA is a cloud service, so you don't have to install anything on-premise. It's a SaaS service which can be set up as in a multi-tenant environment. That's important for resellers, not so for the end customer. But as a reseller, you can have your SaaS environment with all your customers within the same portal. To give you an idea, we have now 4.5 million users and 90 million authentications per month. Also important to know is we have different clouds. A few years ago, we had the classic cloud, but I think now 4 or 5 years ago, we now have different clouds, and this has something to do with GDPR. So the EU cloud has data centers in France and Germany, if I'm not mistaken, Dennis. But this is to make sure that data is never going to leave the geographic region, okay? So you will be sure that your data resides private within the, or is never copied to one of the other regions, okay? Now, this is an example how we're going to set up a policy on STA. So we have our SaaS application. So let's take an example, ServiceNow. For ServiceNow, we can make a policy, or in this case, the application is C-Suite. Oh no, sorry, the application is ServiceNow, and we are going to make it available to an Active Directory group. In this case, the AD group is C-Suite, okay? Oh, sorry. And here we will then add the applications which are relevant, okay? So in this example, Zendesk, Google G Suite, or Salesforce, okay? These 3 applications will be available for all the people which are part of the C-Suite Active Directory group. We will also define, okay, of course, if access is granted or denied. And if it's granted, how will the user authenticate? Now, in this case, we will ask the user to authenticate both with a token and a password. Okay, this is the standard authentication scenario for these applications. Now, of course, we can make exceptions. Okay, so this is a standard scenario, but we would like to make, sometimes we would like to make exceptions. For example, if a user is going to log in from within the corporate network, from within the local LAN, maybe we don't want to ask for a token. Maybe just a password is more than enough. Okay, so we can make policies based on the location, and this is based on IP addresses in this case. Okay, can also be done on geolocation. Okay, or a change of country. If a user all of a sudden logs in from China instead of Belgium, maybe this is the reason to trigger an additional token authentication. We can also make policies based on operating systems. Windows is maybe our standard operating system, but now we see someone logging in with a Mac. Maybe now let's trigger an additional password. Okay. A user device, okay, we have something as known device. So STA is going to remember if we have logged in from the same device in the past. If now we're going to log in from a completely different device, this can be a trigger to change the authentication mechanism. Something about the authentication methods. So we have the tokens, which can either be hardware tokens or software tokens. Software tokens is typically the mobile pass application, which is compatible with OTP push. More on that later. But Google Authenticator can also be used, and third-party tokens. Google Authenticator, it's just like a simple token, as you know, but without the push OTP, of course. Kerberos, so Windows, transparent authentication. More on that later. SMS tokens, email as a backup, voice, so you can be called and then you can authenticate by voice if your provider supports it. Pattern-based authentication, this is tokenless, or you don't need any device, but you choose your pattern. Okay. If you have more questions on that, I can answer it at the end of the presentation. Certificate-based authentication, also possible. Passwordless and biometric, more on that later, but for example, Windows Hello and Face ID and fingerprint authentication on smartphones. FIDO tokens are also supported. I have a separate slide on that later on. So something about the hardware tokens, just to mention, normally you pay for the user licenses. You don't pay for the tokens. So for example, this one, the OTP 110 token is free if you buy a user license. Okay, also the software tokens are free. But we have some special tokens, for example, these ones, which are not free and can be acquired for an additional cost. For example, this one is a combination with a smart card and maybe also an RFID implementation, which makes it also suitable for to access a building, for example. So, like I mentioned already, passwordless authentication, what does it mean? So for Windows 10, we can integrate this with Windows Hello, which makes it possible to send a push to your Windows desktop or laptop. So the user can just click on OK or cancel, okay? So granting the access instead of having to enter a token code. And push OTP, of course, most of you know that already. Instead of having to enter a token, just click approve or deny on your mobile application. Windows integrated authentication, that is what we call Kerberos. So suppose you're logged in the domain already, then if you have a Kerberos implementation, you can have single sign-on to other implementations by working with Kerberos tickets. Okay, so you don't have to bother your users with additional authentications. So this works with Kerberos. Of course, your laptop needs to be joined in the domain, and you need to have connectivity to the Kerberos ticketing server. Okay, but this is also a possibility. I don't know if you know it, but Gemalto, the formal name of Thales, or yeah, Gemalto has been acquired by Thales, but Gemalto was and is still the provider which makes the most SIM cards in the world. So your SIM card in your mobile phone, but also your the certificate on your identity card, your Belgian identity card, is made by Gemalto. Okay, so Thales now is known as the leader in PKI authentication. Now, with regards to STA, what would I like to say is that, okay, you can use certificate-based authentication also with STA, of course. Okay, so this makes use of smart cards or virtual smart cards. Now, something new on the market, not really new, but becoming popular the last couple of years, are FIDO tokens. These are in fact hardware devices. Most of the time, these are small USB devices which you have to plug into your laptop, and you can install certificates on it without having to install your own certificate authority on premise. So for you as a company, the provisioning of certificates is really made easy. And also for the user, the authentication and the rollout of these certificates is really user-friendly. And authentication occurs just by touching the token physically with your finger. Okay, and we have a lot of SaaS applications which supports the use of FIDO tokens as an authentication mechanism. For example, Windows Logon, Google and Microsoft Office 365, but more and more SaaS applications support it. We can even instantly deploy a FIDO token while trying to log into such a SaaS application for the first time. Maybe if we have time, Dennis can demo it. I don't know if we will have the time. Now, also a nice feature of STA is the inline enrollment. So suppose we log into an application and that user doesn't have a token enrolled yet. We can provide that to the user while logging in. So this is called inline enrollment. So this is an example. Of course, here it's in Dutch, but what it says is, okay, you don't have a token, you need an additional layer of security, and the user will be guided through the process of enrolling a token. So in this case, he has the choice between enrolling the mobile pass app or enrolling a FIDO token or Windows Hello. Okay, so he is guided through the process, and once the token is rolled out, he is able to log in to the application with its token. Also, maybe important for you as an end customer is the availability or the possibility to fully customize the look and feel of your login page. Okay, it's not a very difficult feature to implement, but it can have a huge impact to the user friendliness of your users, of course. Okay, we're almost to the end of the presentation. So the last slide I have is something about the licenses. So we have two flavors now of STA. We have STA Basic, which has all of the features. So all of the features I mentioned, except for certificate-based authentication and behavior-based conditions, which is almost released but still on the roadmap. So behavior-based conditions is going to make a baseline of how you are going to authenticate. And if your next authentication is deviating from your normal behavior, you can add additional layers of security. But in general, what we see here in the Belgian landscape is that STA Basic is the most common sold product. Okay, questions so far? I think you're all able to unmute yourself. If not,
no questions in the question box.
No questions? Okay, then I'll give the word to Dennis to present us a demo.
Yeah, thank you, Steven. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, cool. Let me share my screen. Can you give me the sharing rights, Steven?
Just a second. I'll stop sharing my screen first. Yeah, should be able now. But you're logged in twice. I don't know if I've... Okay, can you try now, Dennis?
Yeah. Yeah, I think you see my screen, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So let me move this around. So yeah, before we start, I would like to show you how I just logged into the system. Steven was talking about a grid token, also called pattern-based token. And the first time I used this token, I chose a pattern. So let's say I took the top row, then my password in this case is 87605. The next time I log in, the numbers will be on a different place, but I just type the numbers under my pattern, which is in this case the top row. This looks easy. It is easy, but you can also make it more complex. You can make it 6 by 6, or you can make it 7 by 7. Instead of numeric, you can make it alphanumeric or complex alphanumeric. And you can even put a pin in front or behind the pattern. So you can make it as secure as you want it to be. So let me now log into the console. For the ones who are familiar with the system, you might know this console, and then at the right you have the extended features, which brings you to this console. So this is what we called the old SafeNet Authentication Service console, now rebranded to STA, and on top of the SaaS you get the access management module, and this is what you all get. So as you see, it's multi-tier, multi-tenant. You can see what kind of license you have. And you can see at once how you are doing today. So you can see the authentication activity per policy, per application. And also you can click on the access logs where you can see per user what is going on in real time. So it updates instantly. Also, if you have multiple operators, you might want to see who is creating a policy and who is updating a policy, for instance. So therefore, you have the audit log, which shows you everything what is done within this console. So as you see, most of the time I'm managing this system. If we add an application, we just click on the plus button and then we get into the application catalog. As you can see, it's quite a huge list, but it's not an endless list. If you have an application which does not show up in this list, then you can use the generic template. With the generic template, you can just add any application which is either the protocol SAML or OpenID Connect. And then in here, you can select which protocol you are using. And in case for OpenID Connect, you can use confidential and public. The benefit of using an existing template, so let's take the Adobe, for instance, you get a help documentation. So with this help documentation, you could easily see what you need to do in this case on Adobe and all the steps you would need to do there. Once you've completed the steps there, the document will also tell you what you need to do on the STA side. And you can start testing and assign the application to a group. So you can assign it to nobody, you can assign it to all users or to a specific group. And of course, the group comes again from our sync agents. So once you've added a couple of applications, then the next thing you would do is to create a policy. And the policy is working in regards to, it's working like a firewall rule base. So it starts at the top, and once it has a hit, it will execute the rule, and then it will stop. So the first test I will do, I will go to the user portal. So all users going to the user portal have access if they authenticate with either a Kerberos ticket or with their Active Directory password, and they also need to use a token once per session. And then you can make an exception, and then the exception is if you come from one of those IPs, you only need to use your Kerberos ticket or your AD password, so we leave out the OTP value. And of course, you have all kinds of different conditions as well, like anonymize the user device, and so on. Also on the right side, you see that we have options to use password, the AD password, use the OTP, so any OTP, the FIDO token, or even the PKI, so the certificate-based authentication. Keep in mind that you do not want to make things too complex, so if you select password and OTP, there's no way you can also select all four of them, because that would be a nightmare for the end user to log in. Also in the settings tab, we have REST APIs, where you can see all the documentation in here, which kind of calls we all have in regards to the API. The branding, Steven was talking about, you can easily upload your own logos and your own colors to make your all look and feel of your own company. Logging wise, you can connect it to a SIEM application, so it can work with a logging agent, which we provide, or it can be fully automated by using the API. The plan will show you what license you've got. Self-provisioning was the inline enrollment, and I've now enabled it for Mobile Pass and for FIDO and for all users. And again, this can be customized for specific groups. And then the groups are again from your LDAP sync agent. So once you've set a single sign-on session, you would also need to specify the single sign-on session timeout. So by default, this is set to 2 hours. I believe the minimum is 15 minutes and the maximum is 8 hours. And the maximum is 8 hours in regards to the limitation of the authentication protocols. If you want to have more than 8 hours, then you could create a policy for it. So then you could say, I'm going to add a scenario if this device is already authenticated in the last X amount of days. Certificate-based authentication, how do we set it up? So you basically just import the certificate chain, and then you could also do a revocation check if you want. So I've imported the certificate here. It's valid till 2023. And how do you do the user mapping? So if I read out the certificate, how do I map it to my user in STA? Because if I go here to the users, I have all the users which I've synced. So let's take my account. And we see here I have several aliases. This is my email and it's synchronized. So it comes from the sync agent. These are my tokens. And these are my applications which are assigned to me. And these are all the groups which I'm part of in Active Directory. Okay. So how do you map? So you need to map it to a specific value. If you want to see more of this user, you could go to the other tab. You can look at the user. And then you see here all the details what have been synced. Okay, so it needs to map to one of these fields. Okay. FIDO, as you can see, it's in preview mode. At the moment, we can just use it for authentication. Later on, you will also be able to manage the token. Okay. Kerberos authentication. So what do we need to do in order to get Kerberos working? Here you have 2 instructions. You can just easily copy it and then paste it into an email, or you can email it directly from here. And then it opens an email. Once this is done, you get a key tab file. And this key tab file is the next step. And then that key tab file needs to be imported here. And then again, once the key tab file is imported, we need to do the user mapping again. So it's always, you need to do the mapping towards the user itself. And then you can enable Mobile Pass Plus. It's enabled for self-provisioning, and you can have a limit of 5 Mobile Pass tokens per user. So let's look at mine, and as you can see, I already had a bunch. I have 2 Mobile Pass at the moment. I have 1 on my Windows desktop and 1 on my Android phone. Okay. So now let's move over to demo. So I take another browser to make sure it's a new session. I go to star.sft.eu and I get onto the user portal. So this can be any website which I've added to the application list. So my username is Dennis. Here you can have multiple languages. I'm going to log in and I'm going to use my domain password. Now it's going to ask me, oh, log on with your FIDO token. So I touch the FIDO token and now I'm logged in to the user portal. And now I can see all the applications which are assigned to me. So let's say I go to AWS and then between the brackets, I've put the policy. So we're not going to be asked for the password, but it will ask us for an OTP. So let's have a look. It skips the password and it immediately asks me, do you want to enter your OTP or do you want a push message? Or do you want to add an extra authenticator or an extra token? So let's send the push message. And as you see here in the bottom right, login request from AWS, and I'm going to approve it. I just click approve and I'm logged in to this application. Same story, Cisco Meraki, password and OTP every time. Yeah, it's going to ask me for my domain password, and I'm a lazy user, so just send me a push notification. You also hear the phone, so the push notification comes in two ways. It comes onto my Windows desktop, and it also comes at my Android device. And now I'm logged into the Meraki. So this is nice, but Stefan was talking about single sign-on. So how do we do single sign-on? So let me move to an RDP session. And in this RDP session, I've now connected to my test lab, and now I would need to use a token. So I'm still the same lazy user. So I hit enter, and then a push notification will appear. I approve the push notification, and then it will ask me for my domain password. And now I'm logged in to this machine, which is on my test lab. But the great part is it's part of my test lab, so it's part of my test domain. So I can also see if I have any Kerberos tickets. With K-list, you can see I have no Kerberos tickets. So if I do the same demo, which I've just done, I'm going to click start. No, hang on. Now it moves to the wrong policy. Let me show you which policy. Because I would like to disable now the FIDO part, because I would like to show you this policy, the user portal. It goes to the user portal from a trusted device, so it will not ask me for any password. It will just use Kerberos authentication. So let me close the browser. Okay, list purge. All the tickets are gone. Now let's see if it does the same. I click OK. And as you can see now, it didn't even ask me to authenticate because it authenticated me with my Kerberos ticket, which is this one. And if we go back to the policy and we have a look at the exit logs. In the meanwhile, let me show you what happens if I now click on the application. So I go to AWS. Remember, the policy was no password or OTP every time. But in this case, it is doing a single sign-on based on the Kerberos ticket. And the same story here with the Cisco Meraki. And why is that? If I then come back here, to the access logs, I went as user Dennis to the user portal, and I had a policy user portal with a scenario from Trusted Network, and I used the Kerberos ticket. So let's have a look at the policies. The name was user portal. The scenario was from Trusted Network, and this was indeed the case for the Kerberos ticket. If I now go back here, I would also see the other two which I've just contacted. So I went to AWS. AWS is the policy, and again I used the same scenario. And now you see there's a session, which means it's a single sign-on session. So based on this Kerberos ticket, it does do a single sign-on to this one and to the other one. Let me show you here in the policy. So we look up the policy Meraki. All users going to Meraki need to authenticate with a password and an OTP, but from a trusted network, I used only the Kerberos ticket. And it's the same for the AWS. I did the same here. That's all what I wanted to show you in a demo. Are there any other things you would like to see now? Any questions, perhaps? No, Steven, Giovanni, any closing words?
Maybe Dennis, maybe you can show something with the FIDO token. I don't know if that's possible.
Yeah, no problem. So let's, my user Dennis, is part of the FIDO group. So I'm going to the user portal, and then I would need to authenticate. Let's use only a FIDO token once per session. Okay. I need to enable the policy, and I'm gonna close down the browser, because once the browser is closed, it's a new session. And now let's go to the user portal. Click on Start, and the user is Dennis. And now it's saying, hey, would you like to authenticate with your FIDO token? So I've inserted my FIDO token, I touched the FIDO token, and once I've touched it, it logs me in. And then later on, you will also see that you have a FIDO token in here. So the whole FIDO token management will also be part of STA. So if we now go back to the access logs, I went to the user portal, and this was my policy, and the credential I've used was a FIDO token. It's as easy as that.
Okay, thanks, Dennis.
Yeah, no problem.
Any more questions from the rest of the attendees? Don't be shy.
I don't see any questions in the question box. So if anybody still has a question, now is the time, I would say. Okay, no questions then. I think then we are ready to wrap it up. Thank you all for attending. I will be sending out these presentations as well. So if you want to take a look at the recording later on, that's still possible. Thank you, and talk to you soon.
Okay, thank you, Dennis.
Thanks a lot. Yep.
Thank you guys for attending. Bye-bye.